I thought my father's retirement dinner would finally be the night our family came together. I had bought a new black dress, spent hours getting ready, and drove 45 minutes through downtown traffic to Morton's Steakhouse. Walking through those heavy glass doors, I felt hopeful for the first time in years. Maybe tonight would be different. Maybe tonight I would finally belong at my father's table, surrounded by the family I had spent my entire adult life trying to reconnect with. Before I dive into what happened that night, I would love to know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you have ever felt like an outsider in your own family, and subscribe. Because trust me, you will not believe how this story ends. Let me paint you a picture of my family dynamics, because without understanding the background, you might not grasp just how devastating that evening became. I am Anna, 38 years old, and the only child from my father Robert's first marriage. When I was 8 years old, my parents divorced after my mother, Linda, discovered my father was having an affair with his secretary, Margaret. Within 6 months of their divorce being finalized, Dad married Margaret, who brought her own two children into the family: Bradley, who was already 15 at the time, and Stephanie, who was 12. Growing up, I lived primarily with my mother in our modest three-bedroom ranch house on the other side of town. Every other weekend, I would pack my little purple suitcase and stay with Dad and his new family in their sprawling colonial home, with the circular driveway and manicured gardens. Those weekends were always awkward. Bradley treated me like an annoying little sister who did not belong, while Stephanie simply ignored my existence altogether. Margaret would be politely distant, making sure I had food and clean towels, but never really engaging with me beyond the basics of childcare. My father, caught between his old life and his new one, seemed to choose his new family more often than not. When Bradley made varsity football, Dad never missed a game. When Stephanie had dance recitals, he was in the front row with his camera. But when I had my 8th grade science fair presentation, he called an hour beforehand to say something had come up with work. The pattern continued throughout my teenage years and into my 20s. The invitation to his retirement dinner came through a text message from Margaret, not from my father himself. The message was brief and formal. Robert's retirement celebration, Morton's Steakhouse downtown, Saturday, 7:30 p.m. Hope you can make it. No personal touch, no excitement about seeing me, just the basic information. I stared at that text for 10 minutes, wondering if I should even respond. But something inside me, that eternal optimist that refused to give up on my relationship with my father, made me text back, "I will be there, looking forward to celebrating with everyone." I spent the entire week preparing for that dinner. I went to Banana Republic and bought a sophisticated black wrap dress that cost me $180, money I really could not afford on my marketing coordinator salary. I made an appointment at the salon and got my hair professionally styled. I even bought a new tube of lipstick and practiced my smile in the bathroom mirror at work. My coworkers probably thought I was going on the most important date of my life, and in a way I was. This felt like my chance to finally be accepted, to finally be seen as a valued member of the Robert Thompson family. I called my father on Thursday to confirm the details, hoping we might chat for a few minutes about his retirement or his plans for the future. "Hello, Anna," he said when he answered, his voice neutral and businesslike. "7:30 Morton's downtown. Margaret made the reservation." That was it. No, "I am looking forward to seeing you." Or, "It means so much that you will be there." Just the logistics. I tried to keep the conversation going by asking about his last week at the insurance company where he had worked for 35 years, but he gave me short-clipped answers before saying he had to go help Margaret with something in the garden. Saturday evening arrived, and I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting my dress one final time. I looked good, professional, and put together. I grabbed the card I had bought for my father, a simple "Congratulations on your retirement" message, with a heartfelt note inside about how proud I was of his long career and his dedication to providing for his family. I had debated whether to include the part about family, but I wanted him to know that despite everything, I still considered myself part of his world. Morton's Steakhouse was exactly as elegant as I had imagined. The hostess at the front desk wore a crisp white blouse and smiled warmly when I gave her my father's name. "Right this way, miss," she said, leading me through the dimly lit restaurant past tables of well-dressed couples and business groups. The atmosphere was sophisticated and expensive, with dark wood paneling and the soft clink of silverware against china. I felt a flutter of nervousness in my stomach, not just about seeing my family, but about the potential cost of dinner at a place like this. I spotted them before they saw me. Margaret sat at the head of a large round table that could easily accommodate 8 people, wearing a burgundy silk blouse that complemented her freshly colored auburn hair. She looked elegant and confident every inch the successful insurance executive's wife. My father sat to her right looking distinguished in a navy blue suit that I did not recognize. He must have bought it especially for tonight. Bradley was there with his wife Tiffany, a petite blonde woman who worked as a pharmaceutical sales representative. They had been married for 5 years but had no children yet, something that Margaret frequently mentioned with poorly concealed disappointment. Stephanie sat across from them, scrolling through her phone with the distracted air of someone who would rather be anywhere else. At 39, she worked as a dental hygienist and lived alone in a downtown apartment that our father helped subsidize. As I approached the table, Margaret looked up and gave me a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. "Anna, you made it," she said, her tone suggesting mild surprise rather than genuine pleasure. "You look nice, dear. That dress is very flattering." "Thank you," I replied, setting my purse down and preparing to take one of the empty chairs at the table. "Sorry I am a few minutes late. Traffic was heavier than I expected." Bradley glanced up from his conversation with Tiffany and nodded in my direction. "Hey, Anna." Stephanie did not look up from her phone at all. My father smiled and started to stand, and for a moment I thought he was going to give me a hug, maybe tell me how glad he was that I had come. Instead, he placed his hand gently but firmly on my shoulder. "Anna, sweetheart, you will be sitting over there tonight," he said, gesturing toward a small table for two in the corner of the restaurant about 15 feet away from where the family was gathered. The table was set with white linens and fresh flowers, just like the others in the restaurant, but it was clearly separate from the main celebration. I stood there for a moment, not understanding. "Over there," I repeated, looking between my father and the empty chairs at the family table. "This table is reserved for immediate family tonight." He explained, his voice gentle but matter-of-fact, as if he were simply explaining the seating arrangement for a business meeting. "We thought you would be more comfortable at your own table." The words hit me like a physical blow. Immediate family. I felt my face grow hot with embarrassment and confusion. I was his daughter. I was his flesh and blood. How was I not immediate family? Margaret continued to look down at her menu, suddenly very interested in the appetizer selection. Bradley whispered something to Tiffany that made her stifle a small laugh. Stephanie finally looked up from her phone, not at me, but at my father, with what looked like approval in her eyes. I walked to the small corner table on unsteady legs, feeling like every person in the restaurant was watching me. The distance between the family table and my assigned seat felt enormous, even though it was probably only 20 steps. I sat down heavily in the chair facing their table, trying to process what had just happened. The waiter, a kind-faced man in his 50s named James, according to his name tag, approached with a warm smile. "Good evening, miss. Will anyone else be joining you this evening?" he asked, glancing at the empty chair across from me. "No," I managed to say, my voice smaller than I intended. "Just me tonight." "Very well. Can I start you with something to drink? Perhaps a glass of wine?" I ordered a Chardonnay, not because I particularly wanted it, but because I needed something to do with my hands and something to calm the trembling that had started in my chest. From my vantage point, I had a perfect view of the family table, where everyone seemed to be having a wonderful time. Margaret was leaning toward my father, touching his arm as she said something that made him throw back his head and laugh. It was the kind of easy, intimate gesture that spoke of decades of shared experiences and private jokes. Bradley and Tiffany were deep in conversation with Stephanie about something work-related. I caught fragments of their discussion about vacation plans and house renovations, the comfortable chatter of people who saw each other regularly and shared the details of their daily lives. They looked like what they were, a close-knit family, enjoying a special celebration together. And then there was me sitting alone at my table, for one watching from the outside, like some kind of paying spectator to their happiness. James returned with my wine, and I took a larger sip than was probably appropriate. The alcohol warmed my throat and gave me a moment to think. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through social media, trying to look busy and casual, as if sitting alone at a family celebration was perfectly normal. Within minutes, I saw that Stephanie had already posted a photo to her Instagram story, a group shot of everyone at the table raising their glasses in a toast. The caption read, "Family Celebration Night. So proud of Dad." I was not in the photo, of course. From their angle, you could not even see my table in the background. As I sat there, memories started flooding back, each one more painful than the last. I remembered my high school graduation, when I had specifically asked my father to attend because I was giving the valedictorian speech. He had promised he would be there, even said he was proud of my academic achievements. But when I looked out into the audience that day, scanning the faces for his familiar features, I saw only my mother's proud smile and my grandmother's tiny hands clapping enthusiastically. Later, I learned that he had taken Margaret and her children on a long weekend vacation to Cape Cod. "It was already planned, honey," he had explained when I called him the next day. "You understand, right? Margaret had been looking forward to it for months." I thought about Bradley's wedding in 2018, a lavish affair at a country club that must have cost my father $40,000 or more. I had received an invitation in the mail, formal and elegant, with gold lettering and tissue paper inserts. But when I arrived at the church for the ceremony, I discovered that my invitation had only been for the wedding itself, not the reception afterward. "Oh, Anna, I am so sorry," Margaret had said, approaching me after the ceremony while I stood awkwardly near my rental car. "The reception is for close family and friends only. We had to keep the numbers down, you understand. But it was so lovely that you could be here for the ceremony." I remembered Christmas of 2019 when I had driven over to their house with carefully wrapped presents for everyone, hoping to be invited to stay for dinner. Margaret had answered the door in an apron with the smell of turkey and stuffing wafting out behind her. "Oh, Anna," she had said, looking genuinely surprised to see me. "We are having quiet family time today, just the five of us. But thank you so much for the gifts, dear. That was very thoughtful of you." The door had closed before I could respond, leaving me standing on their front porch with a bottle of wine I had brought for the table. Each memory felt like another small cut, and sitting in this restaurant watching my father celebrate with his immediate family, all those cuts seemed to split open at once. The dinner service began, and I watched as their table ordered with the enthusiasm of people who were not concerned about the cost. My father ordered the dry-aged ribeye, the most expensive item on the menu, at $68. Margaret chose the lobster tail special at $54. Bradley and Tiffany decided to split the surf and turf for two at $96, while Stephanie ordered the filet mignon at $52. James appeared at their table with a bottle of Dom Perignon champagne, which I knew from the wine list cost over $200. When James came to take my order, I chose the simplest item I could find: grilled chicken breast with seasonal vegetables for $38. It was still more than I would normally spend on dinner, but I did not want to order something too cheap and risk looking like I could not afford to be there. The irony was not lost on me that I was carefully managing my budget while sitting 20 feet away from people ordering without looking at the prices. "Dad deserves the best tonight?" Bradley called out loudly enough for half the restaurant to hear, raising his champagne glass in another toast. 35 years of hard work, and now he gets to enjoy retirement with his family. Stephanie nodded enthusiastically. "To Dad, and to many more years of happiness." They clinked glasses and laughed, and I felt invisible despite being in their direct line of sight. James approached their table again, and I watched as they ordered additional appetizers: the seafood tower for $48, stuffed mushrooms for $18, and oysters Rockefeller for $26. Margaret waved her hand dismissively when James mentioned the prices, saying, "It is a celebration. We want the best of everything." My chicken arrived perfectly prepared, but somehow tasteless. I ate mechanically, trying to focus on my food instead of the animated conversation happening at the family table. Every few minutes, one of them would laugh at something, and the sound would cut through the restaurant noise like a reminder of everything I was missing. About halfway through the main course, my father stood up with his champagne glass in hand. The restaurant seemed to quiet down as other diners noticed the formal toast beginning at the large table. Margaret beamed up at him with obvious pride and affection. "I want to thank my loving wife, Margaret, for 30 years of support and partnership," he began, his voice carrying clearly across the dining room. "And my children, Bradley and Stephanie, for being the kind of kids any father would be proud of. I'm so grateful for my family's support throughout my 35-year career at Metropolitan Insurance. You have made every challenge worth facing and every success worth celebrating." He went on for nearly 10 minutes talking about his career highlights, his proudest moments, and his excitement for retirement. He mentioned fishing trips with Bradley, shopping excursions with Stephanie, and romantic getaways with Margaret. He talked about watching his children grow into successful adults and expressed his hope that he would soon be a grandfather to continue the family legacy. Not once did he mention my name. Not once did he acknowledge my existence, despite the fact that I was sitting close enough to hear every word. I might as well have been another restaurant patron, a stranger who happened to overhear a touching family moment. When he finished speaking, the family table erupted in applause. Margaret wiped tears from her eyes, and both Bradley and Stephanie stood up to hug him. Other diners in the restaurant smiled and raised their own glasses, caught up in the warm family moment they were witnessing. I sat at my table with my hands folded in my lap, trying not to cry. The chicken on my plate had gone cold, but I did not trust myself to continue eating without breaking down completely. Margaret glanced over at me once during the applause, and our eyes met for just a moment. She looked almost guilty, but then quickly turned back to my father and whispered something in his ear that made him smile. The dinner continued with dessert service, and if I thought the main course had been expensive, I was not prepared for what came next. James appeared at their table with the dessert menu, and Bradley immediately began making suggestions with the enthusiasm of someone who had been drinking champagne for over 2 hours. "We need to try the chocolate souffle," he declared, pointing at the menu. "It serves two, and it is made to order. Dad loves chocolate. And the tiramisu?" Stephanie added. "James, does it come with fresh berries?" "Yes, miss, with strawberries and a raspberry coulis," James replied professionally. "Perfect. And let us get the artisanal cheese plate as well, the one with the imported Italian selections." Margaret clapped her hands together with delight. "Oh, and James, what do you recommend for after-dinner drinks? We want something special for this occasion." James's face lit up. "We have an excellent selection of cognacs. The Hennessy Paradis is particularly special, though it is $150 per serving." "Hennessy Paradis it is," Bradley announced, apparently unbothered by the price tag. "5 glasses, please. Nothing is too good for Dad tonight." Margaret nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely nothing is too good for Robert. This is a once-in-a-lifetime celebration." From my corner table, I watched this extravagant ordering with growing alarm. I had been doing quick mental calculations throughout the dinner, and by my estimate, their table had already racked up close to $800 in food alone, not including the champagne wine tax and tip. With the desserts and premium cognac, they were easily approaching $1,500, possibly more. Stephanie pulled out her phone and took several photos of the desserts when they arrived, posting them immediately to social media with captions like, "Living our best life," and "Only the finest for family." She then suggested they order a second bottle of champagne to go with dessert. "James," she called out sweetly, "could we get another bottle of that Dom Perignon? This is such a special night, and we are having so much fun." "Of course, miss. Right away." I felt a pit forming in my stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. My chicken dinner and single glass of wine would probably cost me around $55, including tax and tip. But I was starting to worry about what was happening at the other table. Surely my father had discussed the budget for this dinner with Margaret and the kids beforehand. Surely they had agreed on some reasonable limits for this celebration. But as I watched them laughing and ordering with abandon, I began to suspect that no such conversation had taken place. My father looked slightly overwhelmed by the enthusiasm of his family's ordering, but he was not stopping them. If anything, Margaret seemed to be encouraging the extravagance, patting his hand and saying things like, "You deserve this, darling," and "It is your special night." The cognac arrived in beautiful crystal glasses, and they made another long toast. This time, Bradley stood up to speak about what a wonderful father and role model Robert had been. "You taught me the value of hard work and family loyalty," he said, his voice slightly slurred from the alcohol. "Everything I have achieved in my career I owe to the foundation you gave me. You have always put family first, and that is the kind of man I want to be." The irony of his words spoken while I sat alone at my segregated table was almost unbearable. As the evening wound down, I saw James approaching their table with a black leather folder. The bill had arrived. My father opened the folder, and I watched his face change from relaxed contentment to something approaching panic. His eyes widened, and he blinked several times as if he could not believe what he was seeing. $6,300. He said, his voice carrying across the restaurant, despite his obvious attempt to keep it quiet. Margaret leaned over to look at the bill and gasped audibly. "Oh my goodness, Robert. That is more than we expected." Bradley, still feeling the effects of the cognac, laughed and shrugged his shoulders. "Well, Dad, we all contributed to tonight's celebration. Everyone had a great time." Stephanie nodded in agreement. "Exactly. Everyone should pay their fair share. That is only fair, right?" I watched this exchange from my table with a mixture of fascination and dread. My father's face had gone pale, and he was staring at the bill as if it were a medical diagnosis he did not want to accept. Margaret was whispering urgently in his ear, but I could not hear what she was saying. Bradley and Stephanie seemed completely unconcerned, as if $6,000 was a perfectly reasonable amount to spend on dinner. Then my father stood up from his chair and walked over to my table. My heart started racing as he approached, and I could see the stress and worry written all over his face. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down heavily, placing the leather bill folder on the table between us. Anna, honey, we need to discuss the bill. He said, his voice carefully controlled but tense underneath. Okay, I replied cautiously, not understanding why this involved me. The dinner came to quite a bit more than we anticipated. He continued opening the folder and turning it so I could see the total. Since you are doing so well with your marketing job and your career is really taking off, I was wondering if maybe you could help us out tonight. I stared at the number on the bottom of the bill, $6,347.63. It was more money than I spent on groceries in 6 months. It was more than my monthly rent. It was more than I had ever spent on anything except my car. Help you out? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Well, yes. Contribute to the dinner. As a family. I looked up at him, searching his face for any sign that he was joking or that I had misunderstood. Dad, I was sitting alone over here all night. I only had the chicken and one glass of wine. My part of the bill is maybe $55. Margaret had apparently decided that my father needed backup because she appeared at our table like a concerned mediator. Anna, sweetie, I know this seems like a lot, but you are family. And family helps each other out in situations like this. We all got a little carried away with the celebration, but it was such a special night for your father. But I was not part of the celebration, I said, my voice getting stronger, as the absurdity of the situation became clear. You made me sit at a separate table because I am not immediate family. Remember, Bradley had also wandered over, probably curiosity about what was taking so long. Come on, Anna, do not be cheap about this. Dad raised you and paid for your education. The least you can do is help out with one dinner. It is just money. Just money, I repeated, incredulous. Stephanie joined the growing crowd around my small table. Anna, it is really not that much when you split it between everyone. And you have been doing well at work lately, right? You can afford to pitch in for Dad's retirement celebration. I looked around at the 4 faces staring down at me expectantly, and something inside me snapped. All the years of being excluded, all the holidays I had spent alone, all the family celebrations I had been deemed not important enough to attend, and now they wanted me to pay $6,000 for the privilege of being ignored at my father's retirement dinner. Let me get this straight, I said, standing up so I was no longer looking up at them. You want me to pay $6,000 for a dinner I was not even welcome at? Now do not be dramatic, Anna. My father said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone I remembered from my childhood when he was trying to convince me that his broken promises were somehow my fault. We are all family here. This is just a misunderstanding about the bill. Family, I said, my voice shaking with emotion but getting stronger with each word. You made me sit alone at a table, for one, because this table was for immediate family only. Remember, your exact words were that this table is reserved for immediate family. Margaret tried to interrupt. Anna, please do not make a scene. We can work this out like adults. But I was not finished. You know what, you are absolutely right. This table is for immediate family. And since I am clearly not immediate family according to you, I should not be expected to pay for immediate family's dinner. I reached into my purse and pulled out 2 $20 bills and a 5, placing them carefully on my table next to my water glass. Here is $45 for my chicken dinner and glass of wine. Have a wonderful evening with your immediate family. I picked up my purse and started walking toward the exit, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Behind me, I heard my father's voice calling after me. Anna, wait, do not be unreasonable about this. Come back here. Margaret's voice joined his. Anna, we did not mean it that way, sweetheart. You are being very dramatic. But I kept walking, weaving between the tables of other diners who were trying not to stare at the family drama unfolding in their peaceful restaurant. As I reached the hostess station, I heard Stephanie's panicked voice cut through the ambient noise. Dad, you have to fix this. We cannot afford $6,000. You said Anna would help pay for this? And then Bradley, slightly less drunk, but equally panicked. Dad, what are we supposed to do? My credit card does not have a $6,000 limit. I paused for just a moment at the front door, not because I was reconsidering, but because I wanted to savor this moment. For the first time in my adult life, I had refused to be treated like a second-class member of my own family. For the first time, I had walked away instead of accepting their scraps and hoping for better treatment next time. The hostess smiled sympathetically as I walked past her station. Have a good evening, miss, she said softly, and I could tell from her tone that she had witnessed at least part of what had happened. Thank you, I replied. I think I will. The drive home was surreal. My hands were shaking as I started my car, and I had to sit in the parking lot for several minutes before I felt steady enough to drive. Part of me felt guilty for leaving them to deal with such an enormous bill. Part of me felt sad that what should have been a celebration had turned into such an ugly confrontation. But underneath those emotions was something I had not felt in years when it came to my family pride. I had stood up for myself. I had refused to be taken advantage of. I had walked away from a situation that was fundamentally unfair, even though it would have been easier to just pay the money and keep the peace. My phone started buzzing before I even made it home. Text after text came through from various members of the family. My father, Anna, please come back. We can work this out like reasonable adults. Margaret, you are being very selfish right now. This was supposed to be a special night for your father. Bradley, seriously, you are going to abandon Dad over money. What kind of daughter are you? I turned my phone to silent and focused on driving. When I got home to my small apartment, I poured myself a large glass of wine and sat on my couch trying to process what had just happened. The more I thought about it, the more clearly I could see the pattern that had been playing out for decades. They wanted me to be available when they needed something from me, but they did not want me to be truly included in their family circle. I was supposed to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention they offered, and I was supposed to contribute financially when requested, but I was never going to be considered an equal member of the family. The texts kept coming throughout the evening and into the next day. Stephanie, Dad is really upset. You ruined his retirement dinner. Margaret, I think you owe everyone an apology. This was not the time or place for your tantrum. My father trying a different approach. Anna, I love you and I want to make this right. Let us have lunch this week and talk. I did not respond to any of them. Instead, I did something I had never done before. I focused entirely on my own life for the next several weeks. At work, I threw myself into a project I had been putting off and ended up impressing my boss enough to earn a promotion and a 15% raise. I started going to yoga classes and rediscovered how much I enjoyed physical activity when it was not tied to someone else's expectations. I went on dates with men who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, rather than spending my weekends hoping for invitations that never came. 3 weeks after the disaster at Morton's, I had coffee with my college friend Sarah, someone I had lost touch with over the years, because I had been so focused on trying to fix my relationship with my father's family. I told her the whole story, expecting her to be shocked by how much money was involved, or maybe to tell me I had overreacted. Instead, she listened quietly and then said something that changed my perspective completely. Anna, that is not a family. That is a hierarchy you were never invited to join. Real families do not make you audition for acceptance your whole life. Her words hit me like a revelation. I had been so focused on trying to earn my place in their family that I had never stopped to ask whether it was a place worth having. I had been chasing the approval of people who had shown me repeatedly and consistently that they did not value me as a person. Over the following months, I continued to ignore their attempts at reconciliation. The calls and texts became less frequent and eventually stopped altogether. Margaret sent me a Christmas card with a generic message about hoping we can all come together as a family in the new year, but there was no personal note or acknowledgement of what had happened. My father made one final attempt to repair our relationship about 6 months after the retirement dinner. He called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice softer and more vulnerable than I was used to hearing. Anna, I miss you, he said. I know we had some misunderstandings at the dinner, but you are my daughter, and I love you. Let us have dinner, just the two of us, and talk about this like adults. For just a moment, I felt the old familiar pull to give him another chance to hope that this time might be different. But then I remembered sitting at that table for one, watching him celebrate with his immediate family, while I was relegated to the sidelines. Dad, I learned something important that night, I replied calmly. Real family does not make you pay for the privilege of being ignored. Real family does not ask you to contribute to celebrations you are not welcome to participate in. Anna, that is not fair. We never meant to exclude you. But you did exclude me? You have been excluding me for 30 years, and I finally realized that I do not have to accept that anymore. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Finally, he said, So what happens now? Are you just going to cut me out of your life forever? No, Dad. You cut me out of your life a long time ago. I'm just finally accepting it and moving on. When I hung up the phone, I felt something I had never felt before when it came to my relationship with my father: peace. Not the peace that comes from resolution or forgiveness, but the peace that comes from finally stopping a fight you were never going to win. I am building my own family now, with people who actually want me at their table. I have close friends who celebrate my successes and support me through difficulties. I am in a relationship with a man who introduces me as someone important in his life, not as an afterthought or obligation. When we go out to dinner together, I do not worry about whether I deserve to be there or whether I am taking up space that belongs to someone else. Sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away and let people face the consequences of their choices. I found my peace when I stopped trying to buy my way into places I was never truly welcome. And as for that $6,000 dinner bill, I hope they enjoyed every expensive bite, because it was the last time they will ever expect me to pay for my own exclusion. The truth is, I am worth more than a seat at someone else's table where I am only tolerated. I am worth more than being someone's backup plan or emergency wallet. And most importantly, I am worth being wanted, not just needed when it is convenient. That retirement dinner taught me that love should never come with a bill attached, and family should never make you audition for acceptance. Sometimes walking away is not giving up. Sometimes it is finally choosing yourself. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members expected you to contribute financially while excluding you emotionally? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please give this video a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about standing up for yourself and finding your worth. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they deserve better than scraps from people who should love them unconditionally. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you are worth a seat at any table where you are truly wanted. I wish you all the courage to walk away from places where you are not valued, and the wisdom to build your own family with people who see your worth.